A warm beginning. Lynn still remembered her very first day at Mapleton University. The nervous excitement, the crowded orientation halls buzzing with chatter and laughter, and the sea of unfamiliar faces, each carrying their own hopes and anxieties. As a Vietnamese international student, Lynn's heart pounded with anticipation, but also trepidation. Would she fit in? Was her English good enough? Would the loneliness of being thousands of miles from home ever fade? It was amid these thoughts, as she hesitated in the dining hall, clutching a tray, that she first encountered Emily. Blonde, bright-eyed, and strikingly open, Emily noticed Lynn's uncertainty and offered a seat at her table with a friendly, easygoing smile. That simple gesture, that spark of warmth, was the start of a bond that quickly became Lynn's anchor in this unfamiliar country. Their friendship grew naturally, as if two missing puzzle pieces had finally found a match. Study sessions at the campus library, late-night chats in their dorm rooms, adventures exploring the city on weekends. Lynn and Emily did almost everything together. They balanced each other at every turn. Lynn's reserved, thoughtful nature complemented Emily's outgoing and spontaneous energy. Together, they made even the most ordinary campus routines, waiting in line for coffee, groaning about tough assignments, cheering at football games, feel memorable and important. Academically, both were ambitious and determined. Lynn's strengths in math and engineering paired seamlessly with Emily's talent for communication and problem-solving. They often entered group projects as a team, earning the respect of their peers and professors alike. Outside classes, they volunteered for student-run organizations, sharing dreams both big and small, one day applying for the prestigious Horizon Scholarship, studying abroad, securing internships at top tech firms, and ultimately, making a mark in their respective fields. But it wasn't just about academics and career aspirations. The two confided in each other about homesickness, cultural differences, family stories, and matters of the heart. Emily introduced Lynn to American traditions, Thanksgiving potlucks, Halloween parties, and road trips down sun-dappled highways, while Lynn taught Emily to make pho and shared memories of Tet in Hanoi. Their friendship was more than mere companionship. It was a bridge between worlds, a space where both could be vulnerable, understood, and empowered. Lynn often marveled at how much her life had blossomed since meeting Emily. She felt her confidence growing, her English improving, and her sense of belonging deepening. With Emily by her side, she truly believed that even her loftiest goals were within reach. The promise of the Horizon Scholarship, a coveted opportunity that could change her life forever, felt attainable. Not just as a distant dream, but as something she and Emily could strive for, together. Beneath the string lights of their favorite campus cafe, over steaming mugs of cocoa, they made a quiet pact. No matter where life took them, they would cheer each other on, side by side, through every triumph and setback. In that moment, Lynn felt the future was bright and boundless, as warm and welcoming as the friendship that had come to define her college journey. Little did she know, this chapter of unwavering trust and closeness was only the very beginning. The first cracks. As Lynn's sophomore year at Mapleton University began, something subtle yet undeniable started to shift in her friendship with Emily. On the surface, little had changed. They still met for morning coffee in the bustling student center, shared inside jokes on their walks to class, and partnered up for late-night study sessions. But beneath that warm routine, Lynn sensed a faint, persistent tension she couldn't easily name. It began with small incidents, the kind that could be brushed off as misunderstandings or bad days. During a group project meeting, Lynn noticed Emily growing increasingly competitive, interrupting her mid-sentence to propose a different approach and steering credit toward herself when their work received praise. Lynn, valuing harmony, chose not to confront these moments, telling herself Emily was simply eager to impress their new professors. Then came the social slights, never obvious, always subtle. When Lynn shared the news of her high grade in advanced calculus, she expected a celebratory hug from Emily, but instead received a tight-lipped smile and a quick change of subject. At a weekend party, Lynn caught Emily making a dismissive comment about her Vietnamese accent to a mutual friend. Though Emily later brushed it off as a joke, Lynn couldn't shake the sting. The differences in their personalities, once complementary, now began to clash. Lynn's quiet diligence clashed with Emily's newfound hunger for attention. Emily, who once willingly took a step back so Lynn could shine, now seemed to crave the spotlight, arriving late to shared events with stories that dwarfed everyone else's, including Lynn's. In student organizations, Emily volunteered for leadership roles and on more than one occasion overlooked Lynn's ideas during meetings. Friends from their circle began to pick up on the tension, though no one could quite articulate where it came from. The cracks widened when both girls expressed interest in the same scholarship opportunity, one that could open doors to advanced research and international internships. Where they might once have collaborated in support of each other, Lynn now saw competitiveness in Emily's eyes and felt pressure to guard her own hard-earned accomplishments. Meanwhile, Lynn's confidence wavered. She questioned whether she was misreading the signals or being too sensitive. Nights in their dorm were now silent, where easy laughter once filled the air. Lynn missed the effortless closeness they once shared, but clung to the hope that things would return to normal. She avoided direct confrontation, convincing herself that loyalty and trust would heal the wounds. Yet the distance only grew. Even little gestures, an unanswered message, a cold response while passing in a hallway, left Lynn feeling lost in a friendship that once anchored her. She hesitated to share her worries with mutual friends, afraid of seeming jealous or petty. Still, Lynn kept her faith in Emily, hoping that this difficult phase was temporary, a natural growing pain in an otherwise unshakable relationship. On the outside, they remained the inseparable duo known across campus, but inside, Lynn carried a growing sense of dread, wondering how and when her safe world had begun to splinter. She couldn't have known then that the first cracks were only the beginning. Beneath the surface, betrayal was quietly taking root. A rift that, once exposed, would change everything. The shock of betrayal. Winter arrived at Mapleton University, dusting the trees and Gothic rooftops with a delicate layer of snow. Lynn should have felt proud. Her grades were near the top of her class, her engineering professors praised her creative spark, and a coveted research scholarship, the Horizon Award, was within reach. Yet under the season's festive lights, she carried a gnawing unease. The distance between herself and Emily, once possible to ignore, had grown into a silent chasm. It started with the announcement of the Horizon Award finalists. Lynn had poured months of effort into her application. Countless hours perfecting essays, volunteering, and building a strong project portfolio. She knew Emily was applying too, but they had agreed not to discuss it, hoping to shield their friendship from jealousy. On the day the finalists were posted, Lynn's name was missing from the list. At first, she thought it a mistake. Emily's name, however, was there, gleaming at the very top. She tried to reach Emily for comfort, but was met with vague, awkward responses. Rumors began to swirl around campus. Someone claimed Lynn's application had been suspiciously similar to Emily's. Rumors that soon twisted into whispers of plagiarism, ambition gone too far, and a girl so desperate she'd stoop to anything. Lynn, blindsided, tried to defend herself, but every explanation was met with skepticism. Friends began avoiding her, conversations died when she entered rooms, and the supportive community she'd built seemed to vanish overnight. It was at the campus cafe, their old sanctuary, where Lynn overheard Emily laughing with a group of upperclassmen telling a story about a friend who didn't know when to quit, a real tryhard who even copied her essay. The words stung like ice on skin. Lynn's heart pounded as the realization began to dawn. Not only had Emily claimed the award, but she was fueling the very rumors that now poisoned Lynn's reputation. Things quickly escalated. Anonymous messages spread across university social channels, accusing Lynn of academic dishonesty and insinuating she'd manipulated professors for special treatment. A screenshot of a private message, out of context and cruelly cropped, appeared, making it look as though Lynn had insulted classmates and faculty. Her scholarship eligibility was suspended pending an investigation, and she was called in for meetings with frustrated administrators who, while formal, made it clear she was now under suspicion. The final blow came when Lynn's boyfriend, David, confessed that Emily had warned him about Lynn's supposed dishonesty and manipulations. Doubt and tension pushed their relationship to its breaking point, and David asked for a pause to rethink everything. Alone in her dorm room, Lynn watched her world unravel. Friends fell silent. Emails from her family grew colder as news somehow reached home, and her mentors became distant. Days blurred into sleepless nights and tearful mornings. Lynn replayed every memory, searching for the moment things turned, unable to fathom how the friend who once felt like a sister could so coldly orchestrate her downfall. She clung to the hope that someone, anyone, would see through the lies. But as weeks passed, hope gave way to numbness. By the semester's end, her name cleared from the initial plagiarism charge, but her reputation in ruins, Lynn faced her lowest point. She understood she could not stay where every corner held memories of betrayal, humiliation, and lost trust. The sting of Emily's actions was no longer a question of mistakes or misunderstandings. It was the crushing reality of a true, calculated betrayal. One that left Lynn no choice but to begin again, far from everything she once thought of as home. Collapse and a new resolve. Lynn's world had narrowed to the four walls of her dorm room. The life that once sparkled with possibility had dissolved, leaving only confusion and dread in its place. She often sat at her small window, watching campus life move on with relentless indifference, the clatter of students on the walkways, the glow of study lounges at night, laughter echoing from beneath the streetlights. Yet for Lynn, it was as if she existed on a different plane, a ghost haunting her former world. Everywhere she turned, reminders of the past months stung sharply. Her textbooks lay piled and unopened on the desk, untouched since the scholarship scandal shattered her focus. Posters from campus events, volunteer projects she once led, club fundraisers she'd organized, now seemed to taunt her, evidence of the life she'd lost. Even the scent of coffee in the hallway, once a sign of comforting rituals shared with Emily, now made her stomach twist with grief and anger. Lynn drifted through her days in a haze. After the university's investigation cleared her of plagiarism but left her socially stranded, she found that her schedule, once packed with study groups and team meetings, was eerily empty. Classmates steered clear when she entered a room. Old friends, some perhaps never truly close, offered only fleeting, pitying glances from across the quad. Professors she admired now greeted her not with warmth, but strained politeness or distant nods. Back home in Vietnam, her parents had initially sent loving words and encouragement, their faith in her unshaken. But as the rumors bled back through the diaspora of students and families, even their emails shifted in tone. Her mother's cheerful sign-offs, "Stay strong and eat well," were gradually replaced by anxious worries and an undercurrent of disappointment Lynn had never before detected. Her father, once brimming with pride at every achievement, no longer asked about her future goals. As for David, Lynn's former boyfriend, their relationship had withered in the cold shadow of suspicion and hurt. Their last tearful conversation still echoed in her mind, disbelief in his voice, a reluctance to choose sides, then silence, and finally, a perfunctory goodbye that seemed to end something deeper than romance. Now, his face haunted her only through old photos or a chance sighting in the cafeteria, where he would avert his eyes and hurry out. Night after night, Lynn lay awake, replaying every moment with Emily. Her laughter, her words, every gesture carefully recast in the dim light of betrayal. She scoured emails, texts, even the smallest interactions for clues she'd missed. Was there a moment when this outcome became inevitable? The certainty she had always taken for granted, her own goodness, the justice of hard work, the reliability of friendship, now felt like childish fantasies. She blamed herself for being naive, for failing to see the shift, for putting trust in the wrong hands. Sometimes she blamed the world too, a world that let the talented and vulnerable fall so easily, while rewarding charm, audacity, and ruthlessness. As the weeks dragged on, Lynn's depression deepened. She stopped attending classes, hiding behind vague emails about illness. Meals became an afterthought, cereal and granola bars, if she remembered to eat at all. At times, she wondered if anyone would truly notice if she simply disappeared. Yet even in her numbness, a stubborn instinct still flickered. The need to understand what she would do next, to salvage at least one certainty from the ruins. One afternoon, just after another restless night, Lynn received an unexpected message from Professor Richards, an advisor for the International Student Program. The note was gentle but direct, a call for her to come by the office, just to talk. Too drained to protest, Lynn made her way across campus, head bowed as autumn leaves swirled in the cold wind. Professor Richards greeted her not with accusation or pity, but a kind of quiet respect. "You've had a terrible time," he acknowledged, "and I'm sorry the university didn't protect you better. It's easy to mistake a closed door for the end, but sometimes it's the start of a new direction." The words, simple as they were, cracked something open in Lynn. She allowed herself, for the first time in weeks, to articulate her heartbreak, her loss of faith in friends, in the school she loved, even in herself. Professor Richards listened patiently, then offered a suggestion she hadn't considered: transferring. "A fresh start doesn't erase everything," he admitted, "but it can give you the space to heal and build new memories. You have the grades, and several institutions would welcome you. Give yourself a chance, Lynn." That night, Lynn sat at her desk and gathered her thoughts. For the first time since the storm broke, she permitted herself the possibility of hope. She wrote a list of what she would miss: favorite professors, city walks with Emily, late-night study marathons with classmates who, for a time, truly saw her. But beside each item, she added a line for what might come: new friends, new challenges, a campus untainted by betrayal. The thought of starting over was painful, nearly unbearable. She felt humiliated to admit defeat, to walk away from the school where she had once been so happy. Yet as she scrolled through transfer application requirements and wrote emails to schools across the country, each keystroke felt like reclaiming a little more of herself. There were obstacles. Some schools required statements about her departure. Others needed new references. Lynn poured herself into these essays, honestly explaining not just the facts, but what she had learned, the impermanence of reputation, the hidden tests of character. As she worked, she confronted each memory of loss, each disappointment, and tried to turn them into strength. It was a slow process, but the act of moving forward became its own triumph. Lynn began to take small steps, going to class again, reaching out to acquaintances who might one day become friends, even calling home and reassuring her parents in a voice steadier than she felt. She visited the campus counseling center, finding relief in sharing her story aloud with someone who understood the unique pain of public shame and private grief. Days became weeks. Gradually, the weight of humiliation lessened, replaced by a deep, measured determination. She realized she owed herself not just survival, but a true chance to heal and flourish. When the acceptance letter finally arrived, from a respected university in another state, Lynn cried, not from sadness, but overwhelming relief and gratitude. Packing her life into 2 battered suitcases, Lynn walked through her now empty dorm for the last time. She paused in the doorway, breathing in the silence that had so often felt suffocating, and whispered a vow. She would not let this chapter define her. She was more than what had been taken from her, more than any rumor or lie. Outside, snow fell gently on the campus she had loved and lost. Lynn took her first step away from Mapleton, heart aching but hopeful, resolved to begin again, with the scars of betrayal, yes, but also with the fierce knowledge that sometimes collapse is the only way to rebuild on stronger ground. The journey of starting over. When Lynn stepped onto the campus of Westbrook University, the air felt sharper, filled with the crisp, hopeful chill of early spring. She knew the campus only from brochures and website photos, a far cry from the familiarity she'd once felt at Mapleton. The cityscape was busier, the campus larger, and the faces she passed on her way to orientation were once again all unfamiliar. The urge to look over her shoulder, searching for a friendly face, even Emily's, was almost overwhelming, but she reminded herself, quietly and steadily, that this was her chance to begin again. Her first days at Westbrook were a blur of administrative tasks and awkward introductions. There were transfer orientation sessions where she listened politely, trying to process an unfamiliar map and schedule. Smiling, she joined small clusters of other transfers, most of them just as reserved, all hoping to find new ground to stand on. But the challenges ran deeper than simply getting lost. As Lynn sat through her first classes, she was gripped by a wave of self-doubt she thought she had left behind. Would the professors suspect her past? Would whispers follow her, the way they had at Mapleton? Every time her name was called for attendance, Lynn felt a heaviness in her chest, bracing for a question or a suspicious glance that never came. Academically, Lynn moved cautiously at first. She volunteered sparingly in class, afraid that her accent or an awkward phrase might provoke mockery. But she soon found that her professors valued engagement and curiosity over flawless English. One afternoon, after staying late to clarify a concept in digital circuits, Professor Woodson complimented her thoughtful approach to problem-solving. "You make connections most people overlook," he said, jotting a note in her lab notebook. The words stayed with her long after, a small anchor of validation in uncertain waters. Building relationships proved even harder. At Mapleton, her friendship with Emily had made introductions effortless. Now, every small talk at the cafeteria or awkward group project meeting felt like a high-stakes audition. She missed the easy camaraderie of old friends, the shorthand glances and inside jokes. Here, her identity seemed stuck at the new girl, the one whose story no one knew. When she heard students laughing, she wondered, just for a moment, if any of it was about her. Yet, Lynn refused to give in to bitterness or isolation. She pushed herself to join a student organization for women in STEM, remembering her old passion for creating community. At the first meeting, she listened more than she spoke, but by the second, she found herself volunteering to help organize a tutoring initiative for high school girls interested in engineering. The work was demanding, but as she prepared lesson plans and responded to emails from fellow club members, Lynn began to feel something return, a sense of purpose, however fragile. There were days when the memories of betrayal would surface unexpectedly. An overheard conversation, a teacher's passing remark, even the sight of two students sharing a private laugh could bring back the ache of loss, the way Emily's betrayal had stolen not just her trust, but her very sense of belonging. On those days, Lynn allowed herself the space to grieve. But she also fought to hold on to the life she was rebuilding. She wrote in her journal religiously, charting small victories. A new friend's invitation to coffee, a compliment on her presentation skills, a high grade on her first major exam. Slowly, her world expanded. She befriended Maya, a Brazilian exchange student with an infectious laugh and a gift for pulling people out of their shells. Together, they explored the city's sprawling food markets and discussed everything from homesickness to pop culture. Through Maya, Lynn joined a study group with other international students, finding comfort in shared stories of culture shock, small misunderstandings, and the endless, hopeful process of adaptation. By midterm season, Lynn's routine had settled into a rhythm. Early mornings often found her running along the river path near campus, savoring the physical exertion and the solitude before the demands of the day. Evenings were devoted to coursework and club work, punctuated by phone calls with her parents. Their tentative optimism, carefully disguised beneath reminders to eat well and stay warm, gradually returned as Lynn reported successes and kept her struggles mostly to herself. Her academic performance at Westbrook steadily improved. Freed from the web of suspicion and gossip that had ensnared her at Mapleton, Lynn thrived in her engineering courses. With encouragement from Professor Woodson and her peers, she took on a semester-long research project, collaborating with a team to develop affordable water purification solutions for local rural communities. The project's hands-on nature brought back the excitement Lynn had once felt about science, and with each hurdle overcome, her confidence grew. As the semester progressed, Lynn started to attract positive attention. Her professors recognized her for her diligence and creativity. Classmates praised her reliability and willingness to help others. At the Women in STEM Club's spring banquet, Lynn was asked to share her journey as a transfer student. She spoke candidly about starting over, embracing vulnerability, and finding hope in small beginnings. The applause from her peers was more than polite. It was genuine and warm. For the first time since Mapleton, Lynn felt she belonged not because she was someone's friend or someone's shadow, but because she had carved a place for herself. But Lynn's journey to reclaim her reputation was not without setbacks. There were moments when loneliness crept in, or nagging thoughts about the unfairness of her past. During one particularly sleepless night before project presentations, Lynn found herself scrolling through Mapleton's social media updates. The sharp sting of seeing Emily's name, still featured in awards and leadership news, threatened to derail her hard-won equilibrium. Yet, as Maya noticed her mood the next morning and offered simple encouragement, a hug, a shared breakfast, a gentle nudge to focus on the future, Lynn remembered her new sources of support. By final exams, Lynn's transformation was undeniable. She no longer shied away from speaking up in class or reaching out to professors for feedback. She was elected vice president of the Women in STEM Club, an acknowledgement of her organizational talent and the quiet resilience she'd displayed all semester. When grades were finally released, Lynn had earned top marks in every course, including the research project that would be published in the campus engineering journal. What mattered most to Lynn, though, was not the accolades or invitations she received, but the inner certainty that she had survived and grown. Mapleton and Emily were no longer the center of her story. Westbrook had given her the gift of starting over, but it was Lynn herself who had done the hard work of healing and rebuilding. On a gentle June evening, as she walked across the quad with Maya and their friends, Lynn paused to watch fireflies flicker above the grass. The laughter and voices around her felt like music, not a reminder of the past, but a symphony of the present. In that moment, she understood something simple and profound. Her life had been broken, but not ended. Around her, and within her, something new and strong had finally begun. An unexpected turn. Spring was yielding to summer at Westbrook University, and Lynn's life finally felt smoother, like a song settling into a gentle rhythm after so many discordant notes. Her days brimmed with research meetings, tutoring sessions, and walks around the humming campus. She built new habits, journaling gratitude in the mornings, calling her parents every weekend, trading recipes and stories with Maya, and delighting in the little victories that, cumulatively, restored her faith in herself. But life, Lynn was learning, rarely stayed quiet for long. It started innocuously, during a late-night study break, as Lynn scrolled through her inbox. Sandwiched between automated reminders and club updates was a name she hadn't seen in nearly a year. Hannah Vu. They had met briefly at Mapleton, a fellow Vietnamese student, always cheerful and quick with a joke, but not someone Lynn had been particularly close to. Now Hannah's message was concise, but urgent. "Hey Lynn, I hope this finds you well. Can we talk? It's about Emily." A chill made Lynn's skin prickle. For months, Emily's name had lived only in her nightmares and fleeting moments of bitterness. She had built her new life around never having to revisit that past. Curiosity mingled with dread, but Lynn's sense of responsibility stirred. She typed a reply, agreeing to a video call the next evening. Hannah's anxious face flickered on screen. "I know it's awkward reaching out," she started, "but I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. You remember how things ended at Mapleton?" Lynn nodded. Her stomach knotted. Hannah continued, her words tumbling out in a nervous rush. "I transferred this winter too. Different campus, but guess what? Emily switched here after you left. I recognized her right away, but I tried to stay out of drama. Only now I keep hearing things. Other students losing project credit, rumors started, even another girl's scholarship application getting sabotaged. It all feels familiar. And I remember what happened to you." Listening, Lynn's past traumas twisted painfully inside her. The urge to distance herself was strong. She could keep moving on, close her heart, and let someone else bear the fallout. But she recognized in Hannah's eyes the same confusion and fear she herself had known. That recognition awoke something deep, a fierce need to keep what happened to her from becoming another girl's silent wound. "Give me details," Lynn said quietly. "Everything you can recall. Times, people, even just rumors. Don't leave anything out." The scope of Emily's pattern became clearer. A trail of manipulation, whispered innuendo, and skillfully obscured sabotage that left her competitors isolated, suspected, or simply erased from opportunities. And at the center of every instance, an image Lynn still remembered, a dazzling smile masking ruthless calculation. After the call, Lynn couldn't sleep. The images swirled. Emily at maple-lined Mapleton, Emily in some new common room spinning her web, hurt gathering in the wake behind her. Lynn's own humiliation, the injustice she once thought would fade, now pressed for acknowledgement. Had she been right to walk away and try to start over? Or had her silence enabled the same pattern to repeat? Lynn forced herself to confront the one thing she'd so carefully locked away, her right to seek justice, not just for herself, but for all those like Hannah. It was time to act. The decision was daunting, but Lynn knew she couldn't do it alone. She turned to Maya first, explaining the complicated history, the shame she carried, and the responsibility she couldn't ignore. Maya listened, sympathetic but pragmatic. "This is bigger than old wounds," she said. "You have a chance to set things right, not just for revenge, but for truth." Together, they outlined the first steps, compiling accounts from Hannah and the new victims, collecting screenshots and records, and identifying faculty witnesses whose memories might fill in the gaps. Each step of their process was methodical. Lynn's engineering mind breaking the problem down the way she would a failed machine, not stopping at the first sign of resistance. Yet doubt sometimes crept in. At night, Lynn questioned her motives. Was this need to expose Emily coming only from a desire to be vindicated? Or was it something larger? A hope that the next generation of outsiders, international students, and quiet thinkers might step forward without fear? She reminded herself that her own journey started not just with pain, but with the belief that justice, though battered, could still prevail. As the weeks passed, Lynn contacted her former advisor, Professor Richards. He remembered her ordeal vividly and readily agreed to help, connecting her with administrators at both universities. He also offered his presence as a character witness. "The truth deserves its own spotlight," he assured her. Meanwhile, more stories from Emily's new campus emerged. Some students came forward, their experiences shadowing Lynn's own. Inexplicable rumors, toxic study groups, opportunities stolen just out of sight, seeds of self-doubt planted by a friend who always seemed to be just a step ahead. The narrative grew stronger, harder to dismiss as coincidence. Lynn found herself leading a team, a coalition of voices with more resolve than she could have imagined in her darkest months. They practiced telling their stories, anchored each account in evidence, and built a timeline that charted the evolution of Emily's behavior. The process was painful but cathartic. Every detail brought Lynn a little closer to reclaiming agency over her story. In parallel, Lynn wrestled with her own vulnerability. There were moments when the memories returned with crushing force. The lonely cafeteria, David's final words, the icy conversations that froze her out of Mapleton. This time, however, she was not alone. Maya, Hannah, Professor Richards, and others steadied her resolve. The ultimate challenge loomed, confronting not only Emily, but the entire system that had failed Lynn and others like her. Lynn gathered her courage, knowing that exposing the truth would require her to relive old wounds in a very public way, and that, even with evidence, justice was never guaranteed. And yet, Lynn felt something stirring inside her that she had not known since before the first crack in her friendship with Emily. Hope, fierce and insistent. She realized her battle was not only for justice, but for the right to shape her own story, and perhaps, at last, to bring healing to a circle of victims that extended far beyond herself. As summer ripened, Lynn prepared for the next chapter, one defined by courage and collective truth. She had left Mapleton to escape betrayal, but now she faced it head-on, not just to honor her own survival, but to ensure that the spark of justice, once nearly extinguished, might burn bright for those yet to come. The plan for retribution, the decision to fight back, did not come easily or all at once. For days, Lynn oscillated between hope and hesitation, her resolve flickering in the dim light of old wounds and new responsibilities. Retaliation, or justice, as she preferred to think of it, was not a simple matter of revenge. It demanded clarity, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to the truth, even when the truth was messy. Each morning, as the city stirred awake, Lynn paced the small living room of her apartment, notebook in hand, mapping out ideas and steps. Her anger was sharp and hot, but she knew it could either fuel her purpose or burn her efforts to ashes. Caution and planning would be her armor, evidence and witnesses her weapons. She would demand accountability, but on her own terms. Mapping the battlefield, Lynn began by assembling her core team. Maya, steady and insightful. Hannah, determined yet cautious. Professor Richards, a well-respected champion with influence in both academic communities. Together, they sketched out the broad outlines of their approach. First, Lynn gathered every scrap of documentation, saved group chats, dated project drafts, emails that betrayed subtle sabotage. Hannah, diligent with details, reached out to other victims, collecting recent cases that hinted at a chilling pattern echoing Lynn's own downfall. Next, Lynn and Maya built a digital repository for every file and testimony. They constructed a detailed timeline, not only mapping Emily's actions but correlating them with moments when other promising students had inexplicably faltered or been discredited. This was not just about rumors and feelings, it was about building an irrefutable narrative, grounded in facts and supported by statements that could stand up to rigorous scrutiny. Emotional crossroads. As Lynn compiled her evidence, she confronted waves of conflicting emotion. Sometimes she burned with indignation and the longing to unmask every deception she had suffered. Other times, she felt a gnawing sense of shame and weariness. Is this what she wanted her legacy to be? Was there a risk of crossing the thin line between justified defense and spiteful retaliation? Alone late at night, she would reread her own words, angry journal entries, unsent letters, emails to her parents from the darkest months. The ache of past humiliation was still raw, but layered upon it now was something new and more complicated, a sense of responsibility, not just for her own vindication, but for every student whose confidence Emily had eroded. Lynn realized that to truly move forward, she had to confront not only Emily, but her former sense of helplessness and fear. Strategy and sacrifice. The plan that took shape was methodical and thorough. First, Lynn and Maya set up a confidential tip line through Westbrook's student union, allowing other students who felt targeted by academic sabotage to come forward privately. They distributed information about the tip line through social networks and international student clubs, making it clear that discretion and anonymity were paramount. Within a week, 3 more students shared stories eerily similar to Lynn's, instances of project credit being redirected, malicious rumors spread without warning, lost recommendation letters, and social circles suddenly turning cold. Darcy, a graduate research assistant, offered email logs clearly showing Emily fabricating negative feedback about her lab partner while copying department heads. Armed with this growing archive, the group drafted a formal complaint to university administration. Lynn took care to word it not as a personal attack, but as a detailed, professional report, supported by evidence and statements from multiple parties. On Maya's advice, they requested a special judicial review, bypassing the traditional complaints office that Lynn remembered all too well from Mapleton. Ethics and doubt. Throughout their work, Lynn refused to let herself slide into the language of vengeance. She drew sharp boundaries, no leaking to social media, no whisper campaigns or anonymous accusations. Everything had to be transparent, verifiable, and motivated by a sincere desire for justice. Still, she grappled with her own conscience. After all, Emily was human too. Had Lynn ever missed a sign that things could have been resolved earlier and quietly? One evening, after hours spent revising their statement, Maya found Lynn staring absently at her laptop. "Are we doing the right thing?" Lynn whispered. "We're protecting others, not punishing for the sake of punishing," Maya replied gently. "The truth will stand on its own. If it doesn't, then maybe it's not time." Lynn nodded, emboldened by her friend's support, but wary of what this public struggle would stir inside her and in Emily. Preparation for confrontation. Once they submitted their formal complaint, the university initiated a preliminary investigation. Lynn braced herself for the coming storm. Interviews, document reviews, character assessments, and the risk that the investigation might leak, igniting campus gossip all over again. She updated Professor Richards weekly, grateful for his steady counsel and assurance that, whatever the outcome, she had acted with integrity. In the meantime, Lynn's daily life flickered between anxiety and focus. She continued her work in the Women in STEM Club, trying not to let the investigation overshadow her academic pursuits. Yet every meeting, every glance in the cafeteria, carried an undertone of anticipation, the sense that something was shifting beneath the university's placid surface, weighing costs and building resilience. As the process stretched through the summer, Lynn watched her allies grow stronger. Hannah, once nervous and withdrawn, now spoke at club workshops on academic ethics and resilience. Darcy organized small group discussions on navigating toxic power dynamics in academia. Lynn herself received encouragement from unexpected places. An old Mapleton mentor emailed, having heard rumors of her new efforts, simply writing, "Proud of you, Lynn." Yet the emotional toll was real. Sleep eluded her more than once. There were days when doubt gnawed at her resolve, when she mourned the years lost and the innocence burned away. She sometimes caught herself fantasizing about simply walking away, letting someone else handle the fallout and fading quietly into the background. But other times, especially when she looked at the faces of the students she was helping, the eyes bright with hope, her certainty returned. She wasn't seeking revenge anymore. She was demanding a reckoning, a chance for renewal within an academic community that owed better to people like her. A plan forged in conviction. By late summer, the investigation entered its final stages. University officials scheduled a hearing, inviting all parties involved to present evidence and witness statements in person. Lynn carefully prepared a timeline of her experiences, cross-referenced by emails and screenshots, bolstered with testimonials from those Emily had harmed. Beside her, Maya sorted key documents and coached Lynn on remaining calm but firm under questioning. As the day approached, Lynn lay awake, reviewing every step that brought her here: betrayal, despair, tentative hope, and the decision to fight not out of anger, but out of the conviction that truth and justice could still matter, even after so much damage. She wasn't naive anymore. She knew justice might not be perfect, but this time, she would not be voiceless or alone. No matter the outcome, Lynn promised herself, she would move forward standing tall, defined not by the wounds of her past, but by the courage it took to face them head-on. Defining confrontation. The campus of Mapleton University looked almost dreamlike on graduation weekend. Banners fluttered in the bright June air. Students milled about in robes and cords. Friends and family filled the stadium with excited chatter and camera flashes. For everyone else, it was a day of celebration. For Lynn, it was a return to the scene of her deepest wounds and the stage of her boldest reckoning. Since the first emails from university officials, Lynn had prepared for this moment with both dread and determination. The administration, compelled by mounting evidence from Westbrook and reports from 2 campuses, had invited Lynn, Emily, and the affected students to an extraordinary public hearing, coinciding with Mapleton's commencement. On paper, the event was framed as a community ethics forum and restorative dialogue. But to Lynn, and to the growing number of those who'd followed the case, it was nothing less than a final confrontation, watched by her former classmates, faculty, and a panel, including the deans and the chancellor. Lynn arrived early, sheets of statements in one hand, her other locked tightly around Maya's reassuring arm. The auditorium was already half-filled, a nervous hum in the air. The weeks of testimonies, investigation, and sleepless preparation had left Lynn thinner, tougher, her sense of self newly forged from both scars and hope. As students and faculty filed in, Lynn caught glimpses of old faces, friends who'd vanished during her ordeal, professors caught between empathy and caution, even David, her ex-boyfriend, seated awkwardly near the back. She registered them without flinching. She'd spent months rehearsing her speech, bracing herself for every kind of reaction, but nothing prepared her for the sight of Emily herself, sitting on the panel's opposite side, flanked by her parents and a student advocate. Emily looked composed, pristine cap and gown, hair neatly swept back, posture upright and confident. But as their eyes met, Lynn glimpsed something uncertain in her old friend's gaze. A flicker of fear? Guilt? Or just the stubborn pride that had wrecked so much between them? Lynn gave nothing away, turning to greet Hannah and the others, each a silent survivor of Emily's hidden campaign. The chancellor began the proceedings with solemn formality. Today, we gather not merely for discipline, but for truth. This is an opportunity for those who have felt harmed, for those accused, and for our community as a whole to seek understanding and accountability. The floor was opened to those requesting to speak. Lynn's name was called first. The walk to the stage felt endless. Microphone in trembling hand, Lynn scanned the room and saw not strangers, but the assembled witnesses to her past and present selves. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but steady. My name is Lynn Vu. I came to Mapleton 2 years ago, believing in the power of hard work and friendship. I was proud to be here, proud to be part of my classes, my clubs, my friendships. But I soon learned that not all harm is done publicly, and not all wounds are visible. I stand here today not to attack, but to tell the truth of what happened, to me and to others after me. I lost my reputation, my friends, even my sense of safety, because of lies and manipulation that disguise themselves as competition and ambition. She paused, steadying herself against the urge to dissolve into old sorrow. I was accused of cheating, of betrayal, when all I did was trust someone I thought was my friend. I isolated myself, almost left school, and felt utterly alone. But I also learned, through pain and help from new friends, that our worth is not decided by rumors or by those who envy what makes us different. She detailed the sequence of evidence without vindictiveness, copies of similar essays, timelines matching Emily's sudden rise to honor and Lynn's fall from grace, messages taken out of context and weaponized. Her words were precise, factual, wounding in the clarity of their truth. Lynn finished with an admission she had spent months preparing, her gaze locked on the audience, then Emily. I cannot say what led Emily to do what she did. I leave that to her conscience. But I can say that what happened to me, and later to others, is not the fault of a few misunderstandings. It was a pattern, and it cannot go unanswered if we want Mapleton to be a place where all students, no matter where they come from, can truly belong. The crowd was silent. Even Emily's parents seemed bent beneath the gravity of Lynn's narrative. One by one, others took the stage. Hannah, trembling but resolute, told of losing out on a research grant after a rumor she was difficult. Darcy, the graduate assistant, described a coordinated whisper campaign. Each account overlapped with Lynn's story, painting a pattern too coherent to dismiss. Finally, it was Emily's turn. She approached the microphone, her composure slipping. For the first time, Lynn saw the cost behind Emily's ambitions, the fear, the exhaustion of maintaining a perfect mask. Emily's words were faltering at first. She skirted direct apology, framing her actions as misunderstandings and pressure to succeed. But as the audience grew restless and questions from panelists pressed closer, Emily's defenses wavered. Under direct questioning, and with so much evidence laid bare, denial wasn't sustainable. I'm sorry, Emily blurted at last, her voice shaking. Maybe things got out of hand. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. The words were threaded with desperation, not true contrition. The chancellor called for a recess to deliberate. The atmosphere in the auditorium was charged, many students whispering, faculty members looking somber. Lynn sat quietly, Maya's hand resting on hers. The verdict was issued before sunset. The panel found overwhelming evidence of systematic academic sabotage and targeted reputation harm. Emily's honors were revoked, her degree placed under administrative review, pending completion of academic integrity seminars and community restitution. The university formally exonerated Lynn and the others, with a public apology for their pain and lost opportunities. When Lynn was called back to the stage for closing remarks, she didn't gloat. Instead, she thanked the friends and professors who'd stood by her, even in silence, and urged Mapleton to instill safeguards so that such betrayals could never flourish unseen. As people streamed into the twilight, Lynn could feel the weight of the past start to lift. Some old classmates approached her with tentative apologies or simple congratulations. David found her in the crowd, his face uncertain but earnest. "I'm so sorry," he managed. "I should have believed you." Lynn offered him a gentle, knowing smile. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after," she replied softly. She looked out over the campus that had once felt like home, then like a cage, now transformed again by justice and her own courage. In the dying light, Lynn knew with certainty that though the scars would never fully vanish, she had reclaimed her story, one spoken aloud, witnessed, and no longer owned by anyone but herself. Collapse and resolution. The storm that had gathered around Emily finally broke. The days after the hearing at Mapleton were heavy and chaotic. Not just for Emily, but for everyone whose lives she had touched, wounded, or changed. Embroiled in a sudden public reckoning, Emily moved through campus under a cloud so thick that even her closest remaining friends kept their distance. For the first time in her academic life, she found herself unable to slip between conversations with easy charm or redirect blame with clever words. Her old strategies, smiles, plausible denials, subtle pivots, no longer worked. The walls she'd built around herself for protection were rapidly closing in. News of the tribunal's findings spread fast, ricocheting beyond Mapleton to online forums, alumni networks, and even among the faculty's professional circles. Some students were shocked. Others, who had harbored doubts about Emily's rise, whispered that it explained so much about their own missed opportunities or brief, unexplained conflicts. Even professors now looked at Emily through a different lens, seeing the calculation behind past collaborations, the unexplained grievances she'd left in her wake. Emily had been stripped of her honors, and her graduation was shadowed by shame. For weeks, she tried to salvage what she could, meeting with university advisors, writing apology letters that felt forced and insincere, and oscillating between bitterness and bewilderment. Behind closed doors, her family fought to make sense of what had happened. Her mother veered between angry denial and tearful pleading, while her father urged her to accept the consequences and seek forgiveness. Emily, for her part, drifted through these conversations in a daze. For the first time, she confronted the hollowness at the heart of her ambition, a relentless drive that had cost her every friend she'd once cared for, and ultimately, her sense of self. Meanwhile, Lynn's life took on a rhythm that was both familiar and new. The university's formal statement exonerating her was posted on student forums and bulletin boards. Lynn received official apologies from deans and former professors who admitted, sometimes in awkward, stumbling words, that they had failed her when she needed their support most. A faculty member offered to reopen a scholarship opportunity for her, while another invited her to co-author a paper based on her previous campus research. It was, in many ways, a vindication greater than she'd dared imagine a year before. Yet, Lynn knew the process of reclaiming her life was not just about public apologies or institutional gestures. She needed to rebuild trust, not only in the system, but in her own instincts. The friends who had drifted away now approached her in ones and twos. Some offered sincere apologies, admitting they'd believed the worst and had, in their silence, contributed to her pain. Others simply wanted to reconnect, to laugh together again, as if the intervening darkness could be swept aside like a bad dream. Lynn welcomed some back with quiet warmth, grateful for their honesty, but drew boundaries with others. What she valued most now was authenticity, not popularity. The effect of the confrontation rippled across the campus community. Student organizations began hosting harder conversations on respect, competition, and academic ethics. Safer channels for reporting bullying and manipulation were set up almost overnight. For international students, Lynn became a living example of resilience. New faces, especially those starting their own uncertain journeys far from home, reached out to her, confiding their worries about belonging or asking for advice on what to do when things got tough. Lynn, who had once felt like a shadow wandering the edges of community life, now found herself at the center of something honest and restorative. For David, witnessing Lynn's courage left a mark that would not soon fade. After their brief and awkward exchange the night of the hearing, he sent her an email, long, earnest, and deeply apologetic. He confessed how helpless he had felt, trapped between doubt and belief, and how much he regretted abandoning her when she needed someone to stand by her side. Lynn read his words with a mixture of sadness and understanding. She replied with grace, "What matters is not that you failed to stand up then, but that you're willing to do better now. I hope you find strength and forgiveness too." Emily, meanwhile, struggled. Her required community service and academic integrity seminars were humiliating but instructive. For the first time, she listened, not just to authority figures, but to the voices of people she had silenced or hurt. The process was excruciating. Her old friends faded away. A loneliness settled over her she had never known. Occasionally, she saw Lynn around campus, always surrounded by new friends, her posture straighter than before. Sometimes Emily caught Lynn's eye and wondered if she would come over, offer a word, even a look of acknowledgement. Lynn never did. Emily realized slowly that forgiveness would have to start from within, with a reckoning none but herself could grant. Gradually, Emily began to own her story. At one of her seminars, she finally admitted to everything, not just the acts, but the deeper motivations: fear of failure, hunger for validation, terror of being ordinary. She apologized publicly, not with the expectation of absolution, but because she understood she could not move forward until she faced what she had done. It was not the kind of Hollywood forgiveness that invited a hug, but something more honest, a surrender to the consequences and a commitment to do no more harm. Her future was changed, but for the first time, Emily could look at her reflection and begin to piece together new definitions of success. As the semester closed, Lynn found peace, not triumph, but something softer and deeper. Sometimes, when walking under the maple trees in the golden light, she reflected on all she had lost and everything she had reclaimed: her name, her dignity, her sense of possibility. The scars from the betrayal would remain, but so would the strength she'd forged through adversity. Above all, she promised herself never to let fear or injustice render her voiceless again. Lynn made time for the friends who mattered, for the advocacy groups she now helped lead, and for her own private joys, experimenting with new recipes, running at dawn along the campus river, calling home to Vietnam, where her parents, now proud and relieved, told her they never doubted her heart. She journaled every night, mapping grief and gratitude together, never wanting to forget the lessons hard-earned in darkness. At Mapleton's next commencement, Lynn attended not as the outcast, but as a guest of honor to speak about resilience, integrity, and friendship. Her words were not about Emily or even herself, but a campus transformed by honesty and courage. In the audience, she saw old faces and new ones, all listening with the hope that their own wounds, too, could be witnesses to healing. And so, as the last notes of summer faded, the chapter closed, not with the erasure of pain, but with its transformation. Collapse, Lynn finally understood, was not the end. It was the clearing, the hard-earned space where new stories and new strength could finally begin. The next step forward. The morning sun streamed through Lynn's dorm window, golden and insistent, a quiet signal that something new was finally beginning. She stood in the small kitchen she now shared with Maya, carefully ladling hot coffee into 2 mugs and savoring the aroma. It was the same brand she used to buy during her darkest days, but somehow, on this morning, even the taste felt lighter, infused with a sense of possibility. It had been months since the hearing at Mapleton. The hurt lingered, yes, but Lynn was no longer defined by the betrayals that once eclipsed everything else. Instead, she was learning to claim her story and shape her future with intention. Step by careful step. The choice of forgiveness. A question lingered, stubborn and unresolved, at the edges of Lynn's thoughts. Was she ready to truly forgive Emily? She waited quietly, not because anyone expected her to make a grand gesture, but because she knew its answer would frame her own next chapter. Anger had once given her strength to demand justice, to survive and speak out. But carrying it any further was like shouldering a bag of stones. Each memory of Emily's smile turned knife, of old friends' averted eyes, heavier for the distance she'd come. One evening in June, Lynn found herself walking alone along the river, the city glowing in the dusk. The water moved briskly under the bridge, indifferent to pain or progress. Lynn slowed and let the noise inside her mind settle. She thought of Emily's forced apologies, her stumbling attempts at repair. She remembered nights of self-doubt, her family's brief stony silence over video calls, the trust she'd lost not just in Emily, but in herself. She saw again the turning point, not the night everything was taken, but the day she began to build something new with truth and courage. In that quiet moment, Lynn realized forgiveness was not about condoning Emily's choices or erasing the scars they left behind. Instead, it was the choice to lay down the burden of resentment, to reclaim her energy for the work and connections that now filled her life. Forgiveness, she understood, was not a gesture for Emily's sake. It was a gift Lynn could grant herself. She whispered it into the empty air. I set you down. I move forward, now. Lessons etched in experience. With the turmoil finally receding, Lynn gave herself the space to reflect. Memories surfaced, small kindnesses amid chaos, the unfamiliar comfort of counseling sessions. The first time she laughed with Maya over burnt toast in their cramped kitchen. She celebrated the victories big and small. Top grades, new leadership roles in the Women in STEM Association, friendship built on trust and vulnerability. But her true lessons lay deeper. Lynn understood that honor was not a title bestowed by others, and reputation could be undone in moments, but dignity was something she could nurture and defend from within. She'd learned that no one succeeded alone. Mentors, allies, and even brief, supportive words from near strangers had shaped her resilience as much as her determination had. And perhaps most profoundly, she grasped that asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but a source of strength, one she would never again hesitate to draw upon. A new chapter begins. Autumn arrived, and with it, a flurry of new opportunities. Lynn was offered an internship with an environmental engineering firm, her dream since first arriving in America. She stepped into the role with trepidation, uncertain if the wounds of old battles would resurface in new settings. But the team welcomed her for her ideas and work ethic, not for any rumor or past misstep. At Westbrook, Lynn became an informal mentor for younger international students. She started a support group, sharing her story honestly, skimming over the details that hurt, but never hiding the shape of what she'd survived. To her surprise, sharing did not reopen old wounds. It eased them, forged solidarity, and encouraged others to voice their own struggles. Her parents noticed the change over their regular Sunday afternoon calls. Where before her voice had been tentative, Lynn now offered updates with conviction. "I'm doing well," she said, and she meant it. Her father, once quiet with concern, now laughed more easily. Her mother asked for photos of Lynn's new recipes, posting them in family chats with pride. She stayed close with Maya, their friendship deepening through hardships faced together. They celebrated Diwali, Tet, and Thanksgiving with the same joyful openness, inviting old friends and new, crafting a found family that no single betrayal could dissolve. Crossing paths and building bridges. The world, however, was never neat enough for completely clean breaks. There were moments when Lynn crossed paths with Emily, sometimes at conferences, other times through mutual acquaintances. Emily's presence sparked uneasy recognition, the air briefly thick with memory. And yet, rather than shrinking away, Lynn found herself standing tall, no longer threatened. During one such encounter, Emily approached Lynn with cautious humility. "I know I can't undo what happened," she said quietly. "But I hope you find happiness. You deserved better." The apology, this time, came with no expectation. Just the offering of someone still learning from her mistakes. Lynn simply nodded, kindness in her eyes. There was nothing more to say. They parted, not as enemies, but as imperfect people finally at peace with the past. Looking further, reaching higher. Time continued, as it always did. Lynn's scars faded, but the wisdom earned from them remained. She spoke at her graduation, sharing her conviction that true success lay not in accolades or untarnished records, but in living one's values, persevering through loss, and daring to hope again when life's cruelty seemed relentless. She traveled, to conferences, to see her family in Hanoi, to beaches and mountains she once only dreamed of visiting. Each trip felt like another boundary surmounted, her world growing larger and brighter. She dreamed bigger now. She planned projects around sustainable energy. She joined advisory boards for international students. She looked at those just starting their journeys with trembling hands and hopeful eyes and said, "You belong here. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." The joy of moving on. On the first anniversary of her new beginning, Lynn gathered her closest friends by the riverside. They shared homemade dishes beneath string lights. Laughter rippled across the park. For the first time, Lynn allowed herself to celebrate not only survival, but joy. She understood, at last, that the culmination of her story was not the moment she was wronged, nor even the triumph of justice. It was this, the quiet, unshakable reassurance that she was enough, that she could face the world honestly, fiercely, and with kindness for herself and others. As dusk settled and the lights glowed warm above them, Lynn toasted the future, not with fear, but with hope, burnished by every hardship she had faced. Her journey was not over. In truth, she saw it was only just beginning.